Welcome to Believe in Chargers. As we are at the penultimate show, we're going to have a little draft special for you leading up to the draft. So be sure to keep your eyes open for that. But this will be our final full show prior to the Chargers being on the clock at number 5, if in fact that is where their draft pick is situated when the draft commences. First round, prime time, Thursday night, April 25th, here with my man Lorenzo Neal. Of course, all decade, all world, all greats. You name the Charger team, he is part of it when it comes to the legends that wore the lightning bolt on the side of their helmet. And this year, remember, kids, that helmet's going to get it's going to get an alternate. So we got a third helmet coming this year, Lo. A lot of discussion about what that third helmet should look like. Along with Lo, Matt Money Smith here. A big thank you to all of you for listening, downloading, subscribing, commenting, reviewing, telling your friends, YouTube, wherever you prefer to procure the podcast. Thank you. Thank you. We love doing this, and we are darn excited, Lo, because the draft is right here. I mean, it's upon us, and we're going to start getting a lot of buzz about this thing.
No question, and rightfully so. I mean, it's the National Football League in the draft. Every year, your team, you think, God, who are they going to get that put them over the top? Who's going to be that next player that the Chargers or, whoever the team that you have, whether it's the Niners, they want to know what are they going to do in that war room to get that next guy, to change the face, to change to change the trajectory of whatever team that you love. And just so happen, you and I love this powder blue and this Chargers. If Money, you're talking about just one more helmet, I think some kind of way, if they can just put a hint of red in there, because they're going to bloody guys' nose.
Oh, look at that.
Just a hint of it. I mean, even if it's a drop, people are like, man, what's that red drop? A couple drops in there, because Hardball's going to make them bloody guys' nose. Let's go with red. I'm sorry.
I love it.
You put me in that mode already, Money.
Hey, listen, the helmet uniform talk is big in the world of social media, and especially for the Chargers that have an iconic white helmet now with the number on the side. Of course, we know the lightning bolt is arguably the best mascot of any helmet in the league. It's a great helmet. There's the powder blues. There's people talking about golds, maybe gold helmet, powder blue top, gold pant. I've always been partial to the Royals, just because of my age and that sweet spot of the Dan Fouts, Chuck Cecil, Bambi, Kellen Winslow, those Chargers of the late 70s and early 80s in that particular shade. I would not mind seeing the Royal Gold combo coming back. But listen, that's a topic for another day. We got the draft upon us. And I'll tell you, man, it is just wild how this thing moves, how it is a living, breathing topic of conversation. We have talked about trading back. We have talked about offensive line. We've talked about identity. And now, as we start to do this particular pod, I feel like everyone's talking about wide receivers again, that everyone is just talking about how incredibly talented these three wide receivers are at the top in Marvin Harrison Jr., Rome Odunze, and Malik Nabers, that they're saying teams would be crazy after watching the Devontae Smith contract and what Justin Jefferson is going through right now and CeeDee Lamb, and they're not showing up and they want north of $30 million, that it feels like now this conversation has come all the way back full circle to, man, if you got a chance to take an elite wide receiver with the amount of money they're making and the lack of bust when you pick them in the top 10, it just seems like it's a real safe pick. It's a financially smart pick. And I never thought we'd be back here, but I feel like that's kind of what the conversation's been since the last time we did this.
No question, Money. And if I were to ask you a question, I'll get back into the receivers. But I was going to ask you, do you think the Chargers have made up their mind? Do you think that right now they said, you know what, we're just going to play, we're going to zig when everyone else is in zag? Do you think that they have a definitive answer? Do you think they're 75% sure that it's a receiver, a lineman, a tackle, whatever position they have? Do you think they're 75% set on where they want? And then you think it's a 25% to 25% saying, look, all will move depending on what the haul is going to be. Where are you at before we get into players, just where we at in that sense?
That's it's a great question. And it's an exercise that I'm sure they're doing daily because they're trying to project what's happening in front of them, right? What is going to occur with those first 4 picks? There's rumors that the Patriots might want out, that if their quarterback doesn't fall to them at 3, that they may only like 2 guys. And if one of those 2 isn't there, they're getting out. So the question, then does the Arizona pick not become as valuable because the team that really wanted to trade up to get whichever quarterback has already traded up to get number 3. And the 4th quarterback isn't as valuable to whatever team might be interested in the 4th quarterback, if that makes sense. So I think
No.
so much of it's predicated on, is even though they're picking 5th, what happens in front of them? Is it 4 quarterbacks and they get the first non-quarterback? Is it 3 quarterbacks and Marvin Harrison and someone's going to trade up for that 4th quarterback? All of that comes into play to not get too long-winded and answer your question for you. If they stick at 5 and they cannot get out, I think it's going to be one of the receivers.
Do you?
I think I do. I just think there's too much value there. I've got to believe, I think there's depth to the offensive line group, and it feels like depending on who you talk to, one person might have Joe Alt as their number 1. Another has Fuaga as their number 1. Another Latham is their number 1. Another, you know what I mean? Fuanga is they have got Fatanu. I'm sorry. Everybody's got somebody else.
Right. Right.
And it's so to me it feels like, but when you ask around, they all agree these 3 receivers are special at whichever one you like, whichever style you prefer, and then there's a sizable gap before you get to receiver 4.
I totally agree with you, and you look at the receivers. Those 3. You're right. They are men, boys. Those guys can come in and change. They're game changers instantly. But when you hear the different people, and you think about Harbaugh, and think about what you had when his strength coach, and just think about the message that you've been hearing. We want physical. They talk about, hey, look, the line. It starts with the trench. It's up to these guys. When you hear those types of messages, when you're hearing that, what makes you think that they'll deter and say, because everyone we've had on Great Bucky came on and talked about who Harbaugh is.
You bet his house on
who
it.
Harbaugh is, and what makes you? It's because these guys are so rare, they're so unique that you think, okay, I understand they like to build intrenchants, but they need this type of game changer to put them over the hump.
So I get it. I'm with you. It's like, hey, this is the brand of football they want to play. How does a wide receiver help that? I think it's a great question. We talked about Jim Harbaugh teams. They don't need that elite number 1 wide receiver to win and win at a high level. So I'm trying to ride that and also ride the Baltimore Ravens philosophy of drafting, which is they always take best player, regardless of position. Like it's not about what we need right now. It's not about, we need a D tackle. There's a D tackle, but we like the tight end more. They've always done that. They took Kyle Hamilton. Nobody takes safeties in the top 10, and they did, or top 15, wherever they took Kyle. I think it was like pick 11 or 12 or something like that. Like, that's a high pick for a safety, but he was the number 1 guy on their board.
Right.
They took a center in the first round 2 years ago. Like, they take wide receivers. Greg Roman was there. And they're drafting wide receivers in the first round. They're drafting Rashad Bateman. They're drafting Hollywood Brown. So it's not like that's what I'm trying to. So that's what I'm trying to balance.
So when you say that, money, and you're balancing, because I'm just going to keep peppering and ask you this question.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you look at that and you say, okay, I'm going to ask you, the last 3 or 4 years, which receiver, the number 1 receiver, the top 5 receivers in the league, has won Super Bowls? When you look around the league, the Rams, when they were look at the kind of receivers, are they a top? Are they finesse? So when you think about the teams that win the Super Bowl, is it great receivers? Are we putting too much weight? Of course, the great Jerry Rice. We know you still see certain guys, what they can do. Certain receivers, Andre, was unbelievable for the
Andre
different
Johnson
guys. Andre Johnson, but is it receivers that are getting guys over the hump, in your opinion? So I'm just trying to figure this out too.
So here, I think there's so many ways to parse this, right? One is, football is so circumstantial, and injuries and matchups, and it's an elimination tournament. It's one game and done. It's not best of 7, where typically the best roster wins out. It's just, did you play great that day? Did the ball bounce your way? Were there mistakes? Was there a missed assignment?
Sure.
There's all of that comes into play. So the way I think maybe they look at it more so is, what are the safest picks? You never want to miss on your first rounders. If you're not hitting home runs, it's okay. If you're hitting doubles in the first round, just as long as you don't strike out.
Right.
That's the most important thing. So I think when you look at when you look at picks in the top 10 and just kind of if you go through recent history, right? It's Jamar Chase, it's Jalen Waddle, it's Devontae Smith that was right there. Like these guys hit, these guys hit. Now, same goes with O linemen, these top O linemen, Penei Sewell, Rashawn Slater, these guys hit. So you're going to get, as long as you get a good player that helps you win games. Like I know the Bengals didn't win a Super Bowl, but you'd be hard pressed to tell me that Jamar Chase wasn't a huge part of them going into Kansas City, winning that game, winning a bunch of games that year to put themselves in that position to get to the Super Bowl. And if an O lineman could have blocked Aaron Donald, which is almost impossible, for just a quarter of a second more, Jamar Chase is wide open, streaking down that field, and they win that Super Bowl. So I think it's more about, hey, which player do we think when we don't plan on picking at number 5 ever again? So which player do we think? And I also think when you pick this high low, it's also character. It's also you want a face of a franchise. You want that person that you put out there. Like I expect that from pick number 5. Maybe not pick 10 or 12 but if I'm picking in the top 5, I want someone that fans are going to have his name on the back, of their jersey, that they know his number like that, and that's kind of where maybe I'm a little bit. And I don't know Malik Nabers. I don't know Rome Odunze. I don't know Marvin Harrison Jr. But man, I am such a big Rome Odunze guy. I feel like he changed the culture of Washington football along with Michael Penix. I look at the way he's gone through this process. He showed up at the combine and did everything. All those other guys did nothing. And what did he say? He's like, hey, man, I'm a competitor. I want to measure myself not against my class, but I want to get my numbers against all the other great receivers that have ever come through and done all these drills because I think I could be the best one of them all. Like there's just something about that guy that feels, same thing with like Fuaga at Oregon State. There's just something violent and maniacal about the way he plays offensive line. Like when I think of those type of players, that's what I want, right? Like if you
Right.
got to pick this high, I want somebody more than just a great football player.
I totally agree with you. And for me, it's like, and that's why money. We go back and forth because I don't have the answer too. But all I know, if you look at Jerry Rice, if you look at Andre Reed, and you go back all the receivers, Henry Eller. Think about all these great receivers, Andre John, all these guys. Were they a top 5? Think
Right.
about the best receivers, Marvin Harrison. See, is have they ever been a top 5 or top 10? When you think about the great receiver, second round, third round, look at these guys because of the way they outwork, they endure when you talk about greatness, so I don't know if you have to do it in receiver, and that's why I'm on the other side. I know they're talking about these
Right.
receivers and they're unique, but if you look at history, and that's what is weird to me, because so many GMs they're going to say, "Man, we got to get these receivers," and yes, they can change the game. But when you think about just the receiver position and look at greats, it's about perseverance, it's about attitude, it's about that making sure that you have the ability to make sure you can know the routes. It's about, do you have the knowledge? Do you have the understanding? When you look at great receivers, Jerry Rice, he was a student of the game. Go look at your great receivers. It's not necessarily athletic ability and all those things. And I'm not talking about Marvin Harrison Jr., Senior, Junior, because this guy he's perfection on his route. You can tell
Yeah.
that he loves the game. But if you think about the guys that are in the league now and prior, what is it? Was it about that? But if you go to offensive linemen, great tackles, great quarterbacks, it's usually been exception of Tom Brady and some of those guys. But you look at those guys in the top 10, Willie Rofe, the great offensive line, great offensive tackles. Usually those guys, you're right, is more of a hit than a miss, and they usually have the longevity and they're great. I just don't know if receivers, do you need to go that high to get you over the hump?
Right. I wish I knew I don't, the
I
draft.
know.
That's the thing
It's
is we don't
crazy,
have
right?
the answers. In the draft, you don't have the answers. That no one can have the answers to the test because you just don't know.
You don't.
You don't know what the chemistry is going to be, how they fit into a locker room, what is their work ethic. Like there is a reason why the Chargers front office staff is in the 20s because these guys are out trying to figure everything. If you're going to pick someone at number 5 and they're going to be guaranteed $20 million bucks, and it's beyond the money, it's the draft capital.
Yes.
And there's all those other players you could have taken. You're going to make damn sure that it's exactly the person you want on your team, that it's not just the football player, but it's the character, it's the work ethic. And so there's a couple things to that, right? It's, imagine if you get, so look, I'm going to be selfish, right? But before I get selfish, though, I'm going to be selfish here and remind you that Bet Online is your number one source for all your summer sports this season. Baseball, golf, NBA, NHL, all the playoffs are coming, all the latest stats, the news, the scores, so you can invest wisely as you follow your favorite teams. Get the latest odds on the lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds on just about every sport out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Bet Online, where the game starts. So I want to be selfish, Lo. Like, we've talked about the Arizona situation. And if Minnesota trades with them and gives them 11 and 23, and then Arizona comes back and says, we'll give you 11 and 27 to come back to 5 to get our guy. So then I think about that. And I'm like, okay, so let's say you get that. Let's just walk through a couple of these dream scenarios here. Ultimate dream scenario for me is the Cardinals don't get what they're asking for, and they're worried about not getting Marvin Harrison Jr., and they stick and pick. And now there's a quarterback at number 5. And you've got the Vikings and you've got the Giants that are both hot and heavy for that quarterback at 5. I would love if the Chargers would just say, you know what? Hey, Giants, flip us a third. Flip us a third. We'll give you 5. We'll slide back to 6. We're not going to take the 2 firsts from Minnesota. Instead, we'll take or maybe they want a second. Maybe they say, hey, we want the 2. Maybe you can really extract some serious value from the Giants because they want the quarterback. And then you trade back 1 and you still have that extra pick and you can get your receiver. But you get that extra second or you get that extra third where you're taking the O lineman, the D lineman, the corner, something like I would love to see them get value. Now, the other side of that is go back to 11 and 23 if the Arizona Cardinals stick and pick. And now at 11 and 23, I want to take 11 and I'm going to send my 2 from next year to get back to 7. Hey, Titans, you want to know linemen? There's 5 of them. They're great. Here's 11 and a 2 next year. Give us 7. Bang, there's Odunze or Nabers, whichever one is left on the board. And now I got 23 to get my O-lineman, or I can now take 23 to a team that's O-line starved, and I can now trade back to and get a 2 and a 3. And now I've got my number 1 receiver. I've got 2 high 2s, 2 high 3s, and bang, now we're rolling. Now we're populating this roster. So that's something I like. That to me is the dream. That's my dream scenario, is they get 11 and 23 from Minnesota. They trade 11 and a future 2 to get back to 7 and get Odunze or Nabers. They still have 23. They can take one of the tackles right there, Guyton, Mims. One of those guys is going to be there. Or even better, trade 23 to one of those teams that was way up in the top 5 that wants that offensive lineman. And now I'm taking their 2 and 3. Hey, give me your 2 and 3 and a 3 next year, and I'll let you come back up and get the tackle. And now I've got, 4 more picks in the top 60 after getting my number 1 receiver.
Money. That was money. That right there was money. Mic drop right now. Tell me something. Now I'm going to go. I know we're talking about what you like and what we like and what the Chargers would do. Now let's talk about what the Chargers need to do when you think about the AFC West. What does the AFC West, when you're talking about Kansas City, Denver, and Oakland, not Oakland, Vegas, what is it that these 3 teams to you do that you say, we got to have something for that? We got to have something for that. So now I want you to put on the thinking hat. What does the Chargers need to do to win the AFC West? Or what do they need to do to combat what these other teams do well?
Well, I think we're really looking at one team right now, right? It's just hard to look beyond the Chiefs. Now, winning your division, you want to win those other, you want to win all 6 games, but it has been a team. It's that's dominated and continues to dominate. They've been to, they've won back-to-back Super Bowls, won 3 of the last 4. So how do you beat the Chiefs? And certainly disciplined defense seems to be, rule number one. You gotta be disciplined. You've got to, force Patrick Mahomes to stay in that little box and throw the ball. Do not let him extend play. So you need a big pass rush. You need a smart pass rush. You need strength up the middle of that defensive line so he can't escape and climb the pocket. You got to bring pressure from all sides because your edges are going to have to stay disciplined so he doesn't escape.
So
You need
what don't you
corners.
have? So what
Yeah,
is it that they don't have right now?
they don't
So
have
you
those
when you're
interior
saying
linemen.
that on defense right now, you got 2 edge guys, but can the middle of those guys keep the pocket contained, pocket integrity to keep him, not let him step up and do those things? Where they're lacking, if you're just talking about up front, or if I'm taking you through this process, where are they lacking that part?
Yeah. I mean, they have Thule. They can play all 3 of those guys and they can move them around. Joey's played inside. Thule's played inside and the other on the outside. You've got Morgan Fox. You've got Tito Abonia. So you have a few bodies. I like Morgan Fox a lot. He's wildly underrated as a pass rushing interior lineman, but they do need some beef. They need a little meat in there. And I think you can get that in the second and third, which is where that dream scenario plays out, right? You get the extra 2, you get the extra 3, and now you're picking up Hall, or you can pick Murphy early maybe, or in the second round, you've got some of these defensive tackles that may slide, some character issues, some, just because maybe they're not as valued if they're not a pass rushing interior lineman. So there's that. Hall seems to be the one that a lot of people are talking about that might be there in the third. You got Chris Jenkins from Michigan that'll probably be there in the third. So those players are out there. You need linebackers, man. You need linebackers that can cover because Travis Kelce's going to eat your nickel apart. So
Yeah,
you need
yeah,
linebackers that can cover. And that's where, a couple of the guys, pull it up. Let me pull up my list here of,
right.
I've already talked about Peyton Wilson. Obviously, Junior Colson is someone that Jim is certainly very familiar with, as is Jesse Minter, being a Michigan guy. You've got Edge Cooper, who just came out for a top 30 visit with the Chargers. So there's linebacker, and again, that's where get that extra 2, get that extra 3, and now you can populate those non-premium positions that aren't. It's not offensive tackle, wide receiver, quarterback, corner that go high, that you'll get the runs, and it's really hard to pick those up. Let me just get my D lineman. Yeah, Tavondre Sweat's a guy that could be there now. Obviously, he's had serious
Issues. Yeah,
this offseason, but he's
right.
going to be there in the third. We talked about Michael Hall, Chris Jenkins, Darius Robinson. He very well could go in the first, but I think, those other 2, you're probably talking about Jenkins, Hall, back end of the 2, top end of the 3. So that's where I think you got to look. And you got to get corners, man.
Right.
You've got to be able to get some corners out there.
Yeah, and when you think about, like, if the Chargers are trying to build against the Raiders, if you're saying, okay, what matchup when you're talking about the Raiders against the Chargers, what gives the Raiders advantage against the Chargers in your opinion today?
Well, O-line, I mean, you need to make sure your O-line is solid. When you've got Max Crosby and Christian Wilkins coming at you, man, that's a nightmare. So you
Nightmare.
better be sound. You need that tight end that can block, which they did get in Will Dissly, and Hayden Hurst is an athletic and stronger guy. You've got to get a running back that's able to pass, be good in pass pro. They picked up their fullback in Ben Mason. So they can be big, protect, because those guys can rush the passer,
Oh,
man.
question, no
So
question.
that's really the only thing, because they don't have a quarterback right now. So I'm not quite sure, what their plan's going to be sort of moving forward. Obviously look with Gardner, he's solid. So I just don't know if they're going to draft a quarterback. The word is they want a quarterback. Now, if they're breaking in a quarterback, that's a little bit different. It's a little bit easier, but I think Minshew and Devontae Adams can do some damage together for certain.
Mm.
So yeah, I like I said, I think it's more. It's. I'm not trying to slight either of those teams, but to me right now, it's king of the
It's
hill,
Kansas City.
and that's what you've got to. I think that's more of, because everybody else is. I mean, look, the Broncos have Jarrett Stidham as their quarterback right now. They got rid of Jerry Jeudy. Like they've got, they got rid of Justin Simmons. Like they're pulling that team apart and rebuilding it. So for me, it's how do you beat the Chiefs? And I think the answer to that is I don't know. It's
Yeah.
not. They've
No,
had the answer to the test for a while.
yeah, no one's figured that out. So when you're looking at the Chargers, you don't think this is about because every time we talk about this, we think that the Chargers have underachieved. So you don't think this is about rebuilding. So Harbaugh's looking at this team, in your opinion, said, "Look, we got to go get these players, whether it's a receiver, whether it's another offensive tackle. are building the trenches. It's either going to be a receiver or the tackle. This is what we have to do because we're not necessarily building. We are building to win a championship now. Is this how you're viewing how Harbaugh in the draft and what they're thinking?
Yeah, I think as I kind of put a button on it here, Loeb. The way I look at it is when you've got Justin Herbert, you feel like you can win any game. When you've got a quarterback that is that talented, they're able to drag an offense, through a race and over the finish line because they're just that good. I mean, I watched it his rookie year. That offensive line was terrible. It was terrible. I don't know if any of those guys are still in the league. Sam Tevy might be a third swing tackle somewhere. But outside of that, Schofield, Feeney, Lamp, Russell Okun is retired. He was okay. And he was dealing. He's throwing for 5,000, darn near 5,000 yards and 30 touchdowns. So that's what I mean. Like, you can overcome anything, which is why I don't think you ever look at it as, oh, we've got to just hit the reset button this one year, and then let's work toward making sure this roster is right for next year. I think when you have that, and when you have Derwin James as the quarterback of your defense on the other side, and Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack, well, now you've got pass rush, and you've got a quarterback of the defense that you can erase mistakes all over the place and can match up with anyone. So I think that's what leads to we're not rebuilding. We are not rebuilding. We've got way too much talent, and we're going to be in these games. So let's figure out how to get over that hump and win them.
I was in LA last week, and I was sitting down with Maurice Drew, the running back, played Jacksonville. Oh, yeah. And I said, man, the Chargers, and he said he loved Harbaugh. And he said, but Lorenzo, he said, ask Money too. He said, I want you guys, when you're on the show, he goes, tell me the game that Justin won. Tell me when the game was on the line, he said, because I haven't seen when the tide is right there, when you have a chance. He said, I can take you through some games when he had an opportunity. When has he made that though? When has he made that? And I said, you know what? I said, I'm not quite sure, but I said, I know Money would probably. So that's something that he was asking. He said, I'm not sold on Justin now because I was giving him praise. And he said, yeah, he can throw the numbers. Yes, he can throw the ball around the field. Yes, the guy can light it up. But when you seen him? Yeah, he plays Mahomes tough. But have you seen this guy when needed to transcend his game? Have you seen it?
So here's what I would say to that. I'll just go to last year. Or was it 2 years ago? Chargers 27, Chiefs 23 with 1:46 to go. Led them on a touchdown drive. They lost the game. Defense gave it up. I can think of 10 of those where Justin Herbert's got the team in position to win. That they've got the lead with less than 5 minutes to go, and the defense can't get off the field. So I understand what Maurice is saying. Like, hey, man, I remember seeing Justin Herbert, with 45 seconds left. No, he had the lead with – they're up – I'm looking at it from 2022, 27-23, 1:46 to go, and they lose the game. And there's countless instances of those. So, like, that's just think back to the opener last year, right? All anybody wants to talk about is, Herbert getting sacked at, on those final plays, against the Miami Dolphins, 3 plays in a row, right?
Not his fault.
He's got the lead with 3:30 to go. He's got the lead. All the defense has to do is get off the field, and you're going to kneel it out. And yet he's the guy that got stuck with that loss because he had the ball last and got sacked 3 times, and they got nothing going. So, look, I get it. Put some of that on him. But you also have to at least acknowledge they were up 34-30. Hey, does he win the Green Bay game if Quentin Johnston doesn't drop a pass that hits him in the hands that he would have walked in for a touchdown with 20 seconds left? It's so hard to do. I don't think that's fair. And Mo, Maurice knows.
No.
I push back on him and his dumb De La Salle crap for even suggesting
it. He told me to hit you with it. Money,
Oh, yeah.
I was like,
no, Mo's the best. He's the best. He's the best. He and I listen, when you're doing Monday Night Football for the UK and it's 3 a.m. and the two of you are acting like fools for an international audience, you got a special bond. So MJD and I definitely have a very special connection with one another, considering some of the stuff we've done. So I think that's unfair. Is what I'm saying. You can call me biased. I've got the freaking bolt right here on my chest, but I just don't think that's fair. I mean, last year I can point to the Miami game that they have a lead with under 3 minutes to go, and the Green Bay game that they win in a walk-off if Quentin Johnston can just catch the ball that's thrown perfectly and he's got 2 steps on the corner and he should walk in for a touchdown.
Right.
So,
In
not
Miami,
fair.
me and you talked about the Miami game. Shoot, right when he got the ball, even when he had a chance to go down and score, they didn't block. Guys were running free.
Yeah.
They brought blitzes. Offensive linemen missing guys, not even blocking them, letting him run free. So he had a free hitter. So you're right, that's unjust. But
Yeah.
I
I
just
mean,
kind of want.
like week 2, Lorenzo, they're up 21-17 with 2 minutes left. It's like, and they let freaking Nick Westbrook-Akine get a 70-yarder on a double move on a Alohi Gilman. Why is Alohi Gilman, stuck covering this guy? Like, it's just, there's so many of those defensive lapses that led to losses that Herbert had the lead.
And when you say that, Money, let's circle back to this draft because we know it's here next week. Let's circle back to it. Look at all these things you're talking about, how they had the lead, almost win this game, 2 minutes, 1:45, in defense, let them down.
Yeah.
Why aren't you talking more of a heavy emphasis? Have they done enough on defense to compete?
No, they haven't, but they did, I think, something that's the most important, and that's got a new coach on that side of the ball. And Jesse Minter was the best defensive coach in college last year. Michigan's been the best defense in college the last 4 years during this run to multiple playoffs and finally the national championship. So I do think scheme and coaching matters on that side of the ball. They have the talent. They've got enough. When you've got Thule, Joey, and Khalil up front, and Derwin leading the back, you can find pieces. They need corners. They do need corners. And there may be some available after the draft. We're going to start getting those June 1st cuts. Compensatory picks are adjusted and no longer part of the equation after the draft. So I think you're going to start, like Christian Fulton, they're going to take some of these flyers and build some depth in that corner room. And I think you're going to start seeing them build these rooms out. Wide receiver, linebacker, corner, once we get past the draft and that second wave of free agency hits. So you need pillars, right?
Sure.
You need pillars. And then you can build around your pillars and your caissons and then you can build your house. They've got that with
Yeah.
Joey Khalil and Derwin
Right.
on defense. They've got it on offense because of Justin Herbert and a left tackle and Rashawn Slater, which is kind of where that receiver thing comes in, right? Okay, I know you've got the rocket quarterback, you've got the rocket left tackle, and by all accounts these days, you need a number 1 so the defense can't stack the box and has to honor something downfield. Now, maybe that is going to be Quentin Johnston. Maybe he just needed a different voice and a different offensive coach that knows how to use him better than they tried to plug him into that Mike Williams X spot. He couldn't get off press. He doesn't track the ball well over his shoulder. And because Mike got hurt, they were like, all right, well, you're 6'3", you're 215 pounds. Go on, get out there. It's just not his game. So I think, and that's where the whole Rome Odunze, Marvin Harrison Jr. thing comes in. Well, now you can reset everybody. Now you got your X.
Right.
Rome is going to punish corners that try to play him press. He did it all through college. He's a true X receiver. And that's where the Nabers thing, as we wrap this up, I've talked way too much.
No, I love
That's
it.
where the Nabers, the Nabers thing, he's not an X. Could he be? Yeah, he's just not right now. I know that Marvin Harrison and Rome Odunze, that they're X receivers. You can put them out there. Just go on, and then you can reset. Then Quentin could be a Y, or he could be your big slot, and Josh can be your Y, and like that, or I'm sorry, your Z. Josh is your Z. Quentin can be your big slot, like Keenan was, or Josh can be your big slot, and Keenan and Quentin can be your Z, and you've got an X, and now you've got a room that makes sense. Right now, they have no X. They've got to figure that part of it out. So that's kind of where the receiver thing starts to come into play for me.
Sure. Hey, I know we got to wrap it up. Last one for me. When you're talking about, hey, look, this is where they went good on side of the ball and defense. Why haven't you thrown in at first or second corner? Why haven't you talked
Yeah.
about the cornerback position a lot? Like saying, hey, look, they need to draft a guy in the second round or third round if they get traded. Is that a pressing need, or do you think they can do it by scheme and hide guys and say, look, they can just get some flyers, get some guys in free agency, wait till after the cut? Is it that it's not that pressing in your opinion?
No, I think it is. Look, if Sauce Gardner's there, I think they stick and pick and take him at 5. If Pat Surtain is there, they stick and pick. Or J.C. Horn, as great as he looked at playing press coming out of South Carolina, they stick and pick. I think Terrion Arnold's, maybe here Quinyon Mitchell is the number 1 corner, right? People are worried about Quinyon because he did not play press at all in college, and he played at Toledo. Now he showed up at the Senior Bowl. They asked him to play press and looked like he was totally fine and was dominating doing it. But you're a little nervous about that. I get that. And Terrion Arnold ran just about a 4.5. Like that's a little scary for a corner now. I think it's like a 4.45 or something like that. He runs a 4.35, and I think you're talking about Terrion Arnold sticking and picking at 5. So I think it's just a matter of who's available is
Gotcha.
kind of what we're Nate Wiggins, he ran 4.3s, and he's 170 pounds and
Too light.
6'1", and it's just
Right.
like in a Jim Harbaugh defense where you got to tackle, like that's the problem there. So I think that's it, is you just don't have that corner that you'd be comfortable sticking and picking at 5, because that's a premium position. I mean, we've
Sure.
seen it, time after time. Now, sometimes it doesn't work out, like Jeff Okudah at 3, but sometimes it does, like Sauce Gardner. And I just don't know if there's that player in this draft. And that's where, if they decide to trade down and they can't trade back up and they're sitting at 11, and there's Terrion Arnold and Quinyon Mitchell staring at him, and all the receivers are gone, and Joe Alt and Fuaga and Latham are all off the board, then maybe that's where you're like, all right, let's take the corner. We're comfortable. The way the grades shake out is he slots in here, and he's about even with Fatanu, but we can get that tackle at 23. We can still get one of these other guys that we like, Amarius Mims, even though he's only got 8 starts. We can get one of those guys at 23, and let's take the top corner here. So I think it's totally in play, Lo, but I think it'd be a trade-out situation.
Gotcha.
It would not be at 5.
Understood. Well, shoot, I'm going to go on Bet Online and put that one in.
Here we go. Get over to Bet Online where the game starts. All right, that's going to do it for us. Don't forget, we'll do a draft primer. We're going to do it with our friends over at Believe in Rams for the lead up to the draft, and we'll just kind of go over some of the different scenarios and some of the things we could see playing out. But again, we appreciate it. Thanks so much for subscribing, for commenting, for listening and passing the word on all about Believe in Chargers on YouTube, wherever you download the podcast. Again, just rate, comment, whatever you can do to help us build this thing. We certainly appreciate it, and we'll be back early next week for the draft primer as we get ready for that number 5 overall pick on April 25th. Appreciate it, Lo.
No worries. Cheers.